You're listening to Co-Parenting with Grace, the podcast for families raising kids across two homes. I'm your host, Jody Grace, wife, bonus mom, professional peacekeeper, and your teammate in this beautiful work of co-parenting. So put that red lipstick on, Grace family, and let's get into it. Welcome back to Co-Parenting with Grace. Today's episode is one I have been looking forward to because we are going to talk about what's legal versus what is logical. Because let's be honest, it doesn't always feel like those things line up. Someone who knows that the best is my guest today, Mr. Craig Ritchie. He is a seasoned family law attorney based right here in Missouri. A man who's experienced blended family firsthand, also is a small-town pastor who brings both courtroom experience and human insight to the conversation. We are digging into what courts really consider in custody cases, how financial decisions like child support and tax claims are made, and whether the system truly treats moms and dads equal. Just a heads up, most everything we're talking about today is based on Missouri law, so if you have questions and are in a different state, be sure to consult an attorney in your area. But let's get into it. Craig, welcome to the podcast. I can't thank you enough for being here today.
Well, thank you, Jody. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate it. I know so many of our listeners will have some of the same questions that I'm going to ask you today. I'm sure more will come up from the bits that you give me because this is a topic a lot of people want to dive into. But let's start with this one. Tell me, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see parents make when entering a custody or parenting plan dispute?
Well, first of all, they need to remember that everything's guided by the standard, which is what's in the best interest of the children. Mm-hmm. Too often, I think people go into a family law matter, whether it's divorce or paternity action, just looking at it completely from a litigation standpoint.
Right.
Okay. So I often have to tell clients or potential clients, let's think about what we can do to minimize the conflict while at the same time being mindful of protecting your rights in the event that this thing turns contested.
Sure.
Okay. But we don't necessarily want to go into a case thinking that everything's going to be a dogfight.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So one of the things they should consider is just the practicality of how are they going to co-parent these children in the future.
Right.
Obviously, in today's society, moms and dads generally both work. And at home, if they're living together, they are often tag teaming to take care of the children, whether that's providing supervision during the day or night or running one child to this activity and this child to the other activity. They have to tag team and co-parent.
Right.
To a certain degree, we have to have some flexibility so that they can do that even after their divorce or after the paternity action.
Right.
Now, it's not every case that parties cooperate like that.
Right.
But where the parties can cooperate, they can minimize conflict, they can meet their children's needs, and successfully raise well-adjusted children who know that both mom and dad love them and mom and dad are both in their corner.
Yeah, absolutely. Which can be so complicated when, like I've said in most of my episodes, when you get big adult emotions involved and, the he said, she said, and I'm certain that shows up in your office more times than it should. So when a judge is determining that custody, what does that look like? What seems to carry the most weight that drives these decisions?
Well, let me give you a little bit of historic insight.
Please.
So I've been doing this for about 35 or 36 years. And up until about 10 or 15 years ago, courts had sort of a bias generally in favor of mothers, especially mothers with small children. Ironically, the law said that the courts could not do that.
Right.
They abolished what was called the tender years doctrine. However, judges are human. Judges bring into a case their own experiences and their own backgrounds. So while it wasn't really spoken, we knew that fathers had an uphill battle getting custody or even getting something close to custody one half of the time.
Equal, yeah.
Several years ago, that changed in Missouri. The Missouri legislature passed a law that basically said that we presume that the children should be with the parents approximately one half of the time. Now, that doesn't mean 50-50 exactly, but it does mean that the courts start with the presumption that the children should have a considerable amount of time with both parents.
Right.
So that changed the ball game completely, because now instead of thinking one parent should have the children during the school week and the other parent should have alternating weekends and alternating holidays and part of the summer, we often start with the idea, how are we going to fashion a remedy that gives both of these parents significant time with the children?
Right.
That can be anywhere from 1 week with mom and 1 week with dad to other schedules that the children are exchanged more frequently. Now, all that depends on the age of the children, what's going on in the lives of the children, and the parents' respective schedules. For example, and I've shared with you off camera, off the mic, my own divorce 15 years ago or so. We had some teenage children and then a younger child. My former wife was also an attorney, and we were extremely civil as we worked out our case.
Right.
Perhaps in part because we had seen the other side of it.
Absolutely.
In our professional lives. So, for example, I had the children Monday overnight, Wednesday overnight, and an alternating 3-day weekend. She had them Tuesday night, Thursday night, and alternating 3-day weekends. That worked for our respective schedules and for the children. We lived in a small town. We could easily exchange the children. But both being professionals, we knew that on the nights we had the children, we had to make them the priority. And the nights we didn't have the children, we could spend more time at work or whatever. So a plan like that, though, takes a great deal of cooperation between the parents.
For sure.
So generally speaking, we do either an alternating week schedule or we do what's called a 2-2-3 schedule, like Monday and Tuesday with one parent, Wednesday and Thursday with the other parent, and then a 3-day weekend.
Right.
So really the children are exchanged less.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that as long as the parents buy into it, the kids will get comfortable with the schedule.
Yeah.
Now, parents can sabotage any schedule.
Absolutely.
So, if they're complaining, oh, you've got to go back to your dad's house today, or your mom's not going to get you to school on time in the morning, they're going to sabotage that and make it difficult and put the kids in the middle of it.
Yeah, which I'm certain happens a lot. Kids end up in the middle of things they just don't have any business in the middle of, especially, so we have a 2-2-3 schedule, which works beautifully for us. Our kids are young. They've done this from the beginning. They've never known anything but this schedule. But I can imagine that difficulty in getting a parent to buy in when the divorce takes place when the children are, 10, 12 years old. I can imagine that makes things more difficult. And you talk about, the best interest of the child. And of course, that's going to determine or depend on where they're at in their, schooling years, where they're at with their extracurricular activities, things like that. But how do you determine what's in the best interest of the child? And do you feel like that definition always reflects what's best in real life?
Well, when the courts use phrases like best interest. That is very subjective.
Right,
Okay?
right.
Now, in Missouri, there are statutory factors that the court must consider in the event that there's a contested case. In other words, if mom says she wants the children to be in her home most of the time, and dad said he wants the children to be in his house most of the time, and the court then has to go through a set of factors to determine where the children should primarily be. Now, we don't really use terms in Missouri like primary physical custody anymore. Usually it's joint legal, joint physical custody. Joint physical custody does not necessarily mean 50-50, but it means both parents have a significant amount of time with the children.
Right.
The probably the most important statutory factor, although the words don't really appear in the statute, but this is what it's getting at: which parent can provide the greatest stability for the children? Let's say, for example, that a parent has a schedule that he or she works overnights, or their schedule is such that they're on call all the time, or the schedule is ever changing. That sometimes presents some real difficulties in trying to come up with a schedule.
Sure.
Now, again, if let's say you have a nurse whose schedule is published 90 days in advance, if the parties can cooperate, they can work around that schedule.
Right.
If the parties don't cooperate and the court has to look at that schedule, sometimes it's a little more difficult.
Yeah.
So it's again the best interest. There's a variety of factors. It's the mental and physical health of the parties, the expressed desire of the children where they would like to spend the bulk of their time. And as you know, there's a lot of difficulty with that.
Sure.
You know, the courts aren't going to let a 5-year-old make that decision.
Right.
There are some 15 and 16-year-olds that the courts really don't like to make that decision because of maturity, or they've been influenced in certain ways. So many courts will allow them to have some input, but it's only input. And the court has to consider a variety of other factors.
Right. Yeah. I'm pretty sure after this weekend, if you asked my 6-year-old where he would prefer, it would not be my house because I didn't let him have enough tablet time.
Yes.
That's the things you have to consider when asking a 5-year-old or even a 12-year-old, you know, where they would prefer. They're going to have a biased opinion based on what they get where, and it may not always be what's in their best interest.
And sometimes the needs of the children change as well.
Sure.
So if you have, let's say, a 15-year-old daughter who traditionally has gone back and forth between mom and dad's house equally, at 15, when she spends a great deal of time getting ready, getting dressed, makeup, hair, those sort of things, she's not going to be as willing to go back and forth where she has to have all the beauty supplies at mom's house and all the beauty supplies at dad's house. The same thing, I represent a lot of farm families. So you may have, let's say, a 6-year-old child that can easily go back and forth between mom and dad's house. But as he gets older, especially if he or she wants to gravitate toward farming, you know, their livestock may be at dad's house, the farming equipment may be at dad's house.
Right.
So we have to take into consideration their ever-changing needs. The other thing that makes it difficult, quite frankly, is when parents need to relocate. So a 50-50 type of plan only works if the parents reside in a pretty close proximity to one another. So let's say within 30 miles of the school.
Right.
If they reside more than 30 miles away from the school, I think a judge may be skeptical about getting the children there on time every day or when they have parenting time. So there are times when we need to take that into consideration.
Absolutely.
Sometimes even if we have a joint physical custody plan and let's say one parent lives an hour away, we may want to give the bulk of the school week to the parent who resides in the district, more time on weekends or summers or holidays with the other parent. Also, you can be mindful of the school schedule. So many schools now, parents have teachers have a lot of like in-service days where school is not in session. Why not give that to the parent who doesn't see the children as much?
Right.
So we often fashion plans that will say, if school is not in session on a Friday, that the parents' time would start Thursday evening at 6 rather than Friday at 6, for example.
Yeah.
And the same is true on Mondays.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that makes sense. And you touched on it a minute ago, how courts have changed a lot in 30 years, and the way that they side with, mom first. A mother needs to be with her children the most versus dad should have that equal share. I know that's something you've spent a great deal of your career, making sure there's some justice there for the dads involved.
And fathers would get custody in years past, but it was just, I think, a more difficult burden to overcome. And unfortunately, what happened in those days, you would almost have to prove the mother unfit. And when you start throwing dirt at one another, things can get ugly. So fortunately, with the new standard of starting at 50-50, we avoid the mudslinging in almost every case.
Yeah, which is nice. It keeps the peace from the beginning, or attempts to anyway.
Now, there are still cases where one parent, for a variety of reasons, may not be capable of having the children half the time. Maybe it's because of some addiction or chaos in their life of some sort, or just a chaotic work schedule, or certainly if you had an over-the-road truck driver, he or she would find it difficult to have the children overnight, particularly during the school week. So society has changed in a lot of ways, and so the laws have just kind of kept up with that.
Yeah, which I'm thankful for. Well, let's talk child support a little bit. This is always a sticky topic. I believe one that can create some of the biggest, probably most deepest wounds in a co-parenting relationship. When money is involved, it just tends to make things messier. So in a 50-50 situation, how does a judge determine that split of child support or division of responsibilities?
Sure. Well, that's a little complicated, but let me see if I can summarize it this way.
Okay.
There are certain costs that are duplicated in fixed cost. In other words, mom's going to have housing cost, whether it's a mortgage or rent, and utilities, and dad's going to have mortgage or rent and utilities. There are other costs that are not duplicated, things like food, clothing, extracurricular activities and fees and all those sort of things. If parents truly have nearly the same income, they often agree that neither one of them shall pay child support to the other.
Right.
And they'll work out such details as who's going to pay insurance, who might be paying car insurance if you have a driver-age child, cell phone coverage and stuff like that. However, if left to the courts generally apply a formula, and we call it a Form 14 calculation, where you have mom's income, dad's income. There are some things that can come off or deductions, such as if you're paying maintenance or you're receiving maintenance, if you've got other children living in the home, you're paying child support to some other mother or father. There's some adjustments like that. And then the cost of health insurance just for the child or children's included. And then the court determines what is a presumed amount. There is what's called an overnight credit. The old way is, let's say, father, and again, I'm just for illustration purposes, let's assume that mother had the children in her care most of the time. Father had alternating weekends, alternating holidays, and 6 weeks in the summer. The father would be entitled to a credit for his overnights. Usually it was a 9% adjustment. And that then created a presumed child support amount that father would pay mother each month. If it's truly a 50-50 plan, And if you have one who has considerably higher income than the other, then that parent is going to be paying child support, absent an agreement, to the lower income earning parent. And the parent, even though they have the children half the time, they're only entitled, under the Missouri law at least, to a 34% overnight credit.
Mm-hmm.
That can yield some really unfair results.
Yeah.
So it's generally best if the parties can work out some sort of support arrangement. For example, maybe the higher income parent provides the health insurance. Maybe the higher income parent pays 75% of the extracurricular expenses.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I've even done like a clothing allowance. So
Right.
assume that mother would be the one generally taking the kids to get school clothing or summer clothes shopping. Maybe the father would contribute $1,000 in the fall and $1,000 in late spring as kind of a clothing allowance. But all of this requires a great deal of cooperation and trust between the parents.
Right. Which is tough when it's not there, and a lot of times it's not.
It's not. So if you don't have that trust, if you don't have that shared responsibility by agreement, then the court has to set some guidelines, and usually there's a child support payment from one parent to the other.
Right.
The other question that we often see on child support or child support type of issues is, well, who gets the tax deductions? Sometimes the parties can agree that they will split deductions. If they have two children, each will take one child as a deduction. If they have three, maybe they would alternate the third child. But Missouri law presumes, as part of the child support calculations, that the parent receiving the child support gets the tax deductions.
Yeah.
So parents, the paying parent never likes that. They're like, well,
No.
if I'm paying child support, shouldn't I be allowed to claim the child? And we have to explain, well, generally not, absent some agreement.
Yeah.
But you also have to be smart about that. If you may have one parent who has their own business, for example. I know you're a business owner. I'm a business owner.
Mm-hmm.
We have certain deductions that we're able to take as owners of businesses. So it may be more beneficial for the other parent to be claiming the children as dependents because the one parent doesn't need it.
Right.
So a lot of things go into it.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some instances where you've seen it happen where the parent who earns less still has to pay in that child support? I know you mentioned if, let's say, mom is responsible for more. Have you ever seen it happen where everything's pretty well 50-50 and the lower earning parent still has to pay in that child support?
Generally not in a 50-50 custody situation, because if it's 50-50, the court has to determine which parent may need to pay the other parent. So generally it would be the higher income earning parent would be paying the lower income parent. But you can have a situation where the higher income earning parent has the children, let's say, the bulk of the time. Then the other parent, even with much lower income, will be ordered to contribute child support. Again, absent an agreement. So the parties can always work those sort of things out. But if left to the court, let's say for whatever reason, the one of the parents is not suited to have the children half the time. And I'm just going to use these illustrations. So let's assume mom has the children the bulk of the time. The father has alternating weekends, or maybe an alternating 3-day weekend. Mm-hmm. So they have 3 out of 14 overnights or something like that. And the mother has considerable more income than the father. Well, if left to the court's going to determine what child support father should pay to the mother based upon his income and mother's income as well.
Right.
So there are those sort of times when that happens. Again, when parties can reach agreements through negotiating between the attorneys, negotiating between themselves, working things out with a mediator, they can be much more constructive. They have a lot more flexibility in coming
Yeah.
up with agreements than if left to the courts.
Absolutely. That's where you can rely a little more on logic than on
Sure.
that legal standard.
Yeah.
So, well, what advice do you have for parents who are frustrated by what it feels like an unfair financial or custodial setup? If they don't want to escalate things back to court, or if they feel like I'm left with no other choice but to do that.
Well, they should probably always consult with an attorney about his or her rights. Sometimes a cheaper alternative may be for both parties to go work with a mediator who generally is a licensed attorney, familiar with family law matters, but doesn't represent either party, instead is just working to facilitate an agreement. So that would require kind of both parties recognizing, hey, we need to make some changes here. And we don't necessarily want to go hire our own attorneys and fight it out.
Right.
So let's go talk with a mediator and outline the issues to that person and have them help us facilitate an agreement. Sometimes then that agreement can be reduced to writing and filed with the court. Sometimes the parties just operate under it informally, but they have an agreement. Again, with mediation, you get, or any kind of settlement, you get a lot more input into the final solution.
Right.
Courts and judges often have to, they're limited in what they can do.
Right.
Whereas parties can sometimes negotiate something that courts would never do on their own.
Right. Well, that makes sense. You know, in my line of work, my day-to-day, my 9 to 5 is insurance, and obviously I sit down with my clients, every year, every 2 years at least, to go over, hey, this is what coverage you have. Life has changed. Life changes from year to year, and what worked for us a year ago is not necessarily what's serving our best interests now. I would wager that some of the same conversations need to be had around a parenting plan, especially one that is set by the court that wasn't negotiated outside of. So how often do you believe parenting plans need to be modified? And what should parents know about making changes after the original settlement or agreement? And we'll be right back.
Their breakfast plate was a sonogram of a baby.
Oh my God.
So they were like, oh my God, they're having a baby.
That's so lovely.
On that piece of paper was, I'm having the groom's baby from the maid of honour.
Oh.
What?
No. Oh God, the penny's dropped.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
moment.
basically she had given
my
him
God.
an ultimatum, don't go ahead with the wedding and tell her that we're having a baby.
Well, first I would say that generally speaking, there has to be some sort of change in circumstance. Okay. Now that may be a great big change, like some parent needs to move away. It may be a small change because a child is now driving, or a child is engaged in this activity that makes it difficult for you to have operated under the old parenting plan. So generally, when a life event like that happens, or let's say a person loses a job, or they lose their health insurance coverage, or you have a child about ready to start college, those are sort of the changes that you certainly should consult with an attorney, or at least try to do some informal research online. A lot of resources are available online. You can't trust them completely, but it's often a starting point at least. And then schedule time to talk to the attorney and decide whether is this something that we need to formally try to modify. In other words, does an attorney have to file a motion to modify custody, or motion to modify parenting time, or motion to modify child support, or is this something that we can just have an understanding with the other parent?
Right.
Again, if the agreement has been the parents are going to exchange the children at some McDonald's halfway between mom's house and dad's house, and now you have a teenage child who everyone trusts to drive back and forth. That may just be an informal agreement
Right.
that the child will be driving back and forth himself or herself. However, what we always tell parties is when you have a parenting plan, it's a court order, but you two can almost always modify that yourself.
Yeah.
Okay? In other words, you might decide that the holiday schedule is such that under the terms of the parenting plan, the children are supposed to be with father this Christmas day, but mother has a nice vacation lined up. The kids are going to be traveling to see grandma in Colorado or whatever. So the parties can always modify that by agreement.
Right.
What we tell people is the parenting plan there is kind of a backstop. So if you guys can't agree to something different, then you have to retreat to the written parenting plan.
Right.
We also often have to remind people what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if, let's say, mother is always being flexible and allowing dad to kind of make up time because of his work schedule or other activities like hunting or something else, well, he has to extend that same sort of grace or consideration to the mother when the mother's schedule changes.
Changes as well.
So it's funny, and I know we've talked about this offline, but there needs to be a great deal of grace between co-parents, between moms and dads, and former, whether they're former spouses or just had a child in common. Parenting's tough.
It
you know,
is.
I've raised 3 biological children. I've helped raise 2 stepdaughters. I've helped raise 2 grandchildren. Parenting is tough, and it's even tougher where you have families that are no longer living kind of in the same original space or the same under the same umbrella. Children can easily manipulate parents. And when the parents aren't living in the same home, it's that much easier to manipulate them.
For sure.
So what parents need to learn to do is to have each other's back as best they can
Yeah.
and not exploit the events that are really often done by manipulation. So
Yeah.
if a child is disciplined, let's say the child is disciplined in dad's home, and his or her, let's say, social media time or tablet time, as we've discussed, is taken away. Then when they go to the other home, I would suggest that the parent explain, hey, I've limited Timmy on his use of social media or his tablet time because he was being very disrespectful to me and also disrespectful to a teacher. Well, then the other parent who's now receiving Timmy ought to try to enforce the same thing.
Right.
And say, hey, Timmy, I understand you were disrespectful to your teacher and disrespectful to your mom. So you're not going to have your tablet here as well, or we're going to limit that as well. Unfortunately, where sometimes there's some gamesmanship is when a parent says, well, I would never do that to you. And what does that send? First of all, it clearly demonstrates that parents are not on the same page. The one doesn't have the other's back, but it's enabling a child in many ways to be disrespectful.
Right.
Fortunately, as I've explained, I'm divorced. I don't think the children ever heard me speak a unkind or disrespectful word to their mother. Certainly not after we divorced. And I think the same was true on her part.
Yeah.
We would communicate about the children and what was going on in their lives, just like parents need to do if they're, if they're together. It's more cumbersome, certainly. Children, I think, will just grow up to be more well-adjusted and just better individuals and eventually, better citizens, better parents themselves. if they know that there are rules in mom's house and dad's house, even though those rules may be slightly different, they need to respect both parents.
Right.
And that's going to be best for everyone.
Absolutely. The more you can offer consistency across both homes, even if, dad has his rules at his house, mom has her rules at her house, you need both sets of parents to back that parent up in those rules that they've set. And I think that you're just going to raise more well-rounded, more adaptable, more respectful children in doing so. And I've said it before, there's at least a 50% chance that your own child is going to live in a blended home one day as a parent. And why not model for them what that peace looks like and what that consistency can look like for their children?
And as you know, personally, it is even more complicated when you have blended families and you have a new stepmother, a new stepfather, new step-siblings in the home. Sometimes feelings can be hurt. There's perceptions that, well, my stepmom favors her daughter
Right.
Over me. Or, my stepbrother can do no wrong, and I'm always getting in trouble for this.
Right.
I think parents just need to be sensitive to that. And one of the hardest jobs, as you know, is being a step-parent.
Yes.
Generally speaking, it's really the biological mother and the biological father's responsibility to shape the parenting of the children. But other people, step-parents, and you're a step-parent, I'm a step-parent, we love, we support, we encourage the children that we come in contact with. So we want to play a role, and there's a real fine line between the balance that you walk there.
Absolutely.
You don't want to overstep that boundary, but you know that you have a very important role to play. And so one of the things I always encourage parents to do after they divorce or after they've separated, if they were not married, if there's a significant other that comes along, first of all, I would suggest don't necessarily introduce that significant other to your children immediately. Let the children kind of process everything. But once it's appropriate and you have, let's say, a new stepmother or new stepfather or that sort of role in the home, introduce them to the other side. Yeah. The former wife may want to introduce her new boyfriend, particularly if they're serious and they're getting engaged, to the father, and vice versa. And rather than being jealous or being angry, I think a more mature parent will look at it like, here's another adult who's going to care for my children.
Absolutely.
And so long as that happens, I think everyone should get along well. Again, there are sometimes divorces are acrimonious, and there's a lot of hurt feelings. So sometimes that's more difficult.
Definitely.
But when it's appropriate, certainly you should introduce the significant other to the other parent in a cordial manner.
Yeah. That, again, sets an example for the children what they expect, the level of respect that they expect from them, too. So we've brought up step-parent roles. That's something, obviously, that I, carry heavy, carry hard, love big, love hard. So I want to talk about that for just a minute. Do step-parents have any legal standing when it comes to their role in a child's life?
They do, but that kind of gets complicated.
Sure.
And it's also ever evolving.
Yeah.
So let me use this illustration. Let's assume that mother remarries, and there's a stepfather. And this stepfather is intimately involved in raising these children. And then mother and stepfather divorce. There are some theories under the law that says that the stepfather may have some legal rights. Now that's difficult,
Yeah.
and if the natural parents are both, otherwise good parents,
Correct.
then you normally don't allow a third party, whether it's a step parent or a grandparent,
Sure.
to step into those roles. But there are cases out there where, for whatever reason, a step parent has been able to seek some sort of third party custody rights, and that's also true with grandparents. And when I first started practicing family law, we very seldom saw third party custody being
Right.
given to grandparents. I've done that several times over the years, but it's very infrequent. The same way with guardianships.
Yeah.
Now we see more and more grandparents having either third-party custody of their grandchildren or guardianship rights, and those are two different types of proceedings.
Sure.
Sometimes one route is better than the other, but again, that's usually caused by one or both parents having some problems, whether
Right.
that's an addiction or something like that
Right.
that prevents them from raising their children. But that's kind of a sad commentary
Sure.
on society, but we see that more today than, let's say, we did 20 years ago.
I'm sure. Are there ways that step parents can protect their relationship with the child, especially if there's tension with one of the biological parents?
Between the step parent and the other biological parent?
Yeah, if there's tensions between the step parent and a biological parent, but the step parent loves their children,
Sure.
and has a 50-50 role in their lives. What's ways that a step parent could protect their role in that child's life?
Well, I think you have to be pretty careful there.
Sure.
So, what I would be hesitant to do is to create any sort of environment where a step parent
Yeah.
has any kind of secrets with a child.
Sure.
For example, let's say
Yeah, that's a no-no.
let's say the 15-year-old can turn to the stepmother
Right.
and talk about dating and relationship issues and stuff like that.
Right.
But she wants to keep that secret from her mother
Right.
or her father.
Right.
Then the step parent is taking on more of this best friend sort of confidant role rather than a parent.
Right.
So I would suggest even let's back off the step parent issue.
Yeah.
If a parent is hearing kind of secrets from the child, I would always say something like, let's talk to your mom about that.
Yeah.
Or let's figure a way that we can talk to your mom about that.
Right.
Because, she loves you too, and she's going to want to know about this. Now, every case is different, and I
Sure.
understand that there's reasons why a child may not want to share something.
Sure.
Generally speaking, though, it's best that parents not have secrets.
Yeah.
And I think that's even more so with step parents.
Oh, absolutely.
And again, you've got to remember that a step parent really is stepping into a parent role and not a best friend role.
Yeah.
And that can be hard at times
I'm
because
sure.
a step parent wants to earn the trust of a stepchild, but you can't do so in a way that usurps a parent's roles and responsibilities.
Yeah.
And it's a fine line there.
Very much. I would think so because, it's like the kid sees it as I have a mom and I have a dad. So how can this person step in and they they can be my friend. I can confide. But yeah, you've got the adults have to stay on the same page. You have to keep an open line of communication, and even now, with my 6-year-olds, that's something we reaffirm with them. We don't have secrets in our family. What mom and dad, or dad and Jode talk to mom, and mom talks to dad and Jode. We share the same information, and there's nothing you can't tell any of us.
Yeah, the other thing we often see is that children sometimes will lash out at a step-parent.
Mm-hmm.
It's not uncommon for a child, particularly if he or she's being disciplined by a step-parent, to say, "You're not my mom," or "You're not my dad," or "I'm going to tell my dad that you threatened to spank me," or whatever.
Whatever it is, yeah.
And so God bless the step-parents. It's a tough thing, and but
walking a tightrope all the time.
Yeah, but it kind of all goes back to just treating everyone with civility, treating each other with grace. For example, often in parenting plans there are exchange times. The children are exchanged at 6 p.m. Well, if a parent is 5 minutes late, I generally wouldn't get too upset about it. If it's 20 or 30 minutes late, I certainly would suggest that the parent who's going to be late try to give the other one a heads up. That's just human decency.
Yeah.
If it becomes a pattern, I can understand why people get frustrated. I've had clients very frustrated that they arrived at dad's home to pick up the child, or arrived at mom's home to pick up the child, and the child wasn't even there, and they didn't hear from the other parent, and they were waiting in their car 20 or 30 minutes, and they wouldn't answer the cell phone. That can be really frustrating, and again, a lot of this just comes back to common courtesy.
Yes.
If I'm running late for a meeting for whatever reason, I want to let the person know.
Right.
If I'm, I still spend a great deal of time with my parents, who are a little bit elderly, and I wouldn't want to keep my mom waiting 20 or 30 minutes without letting her know, "Hey, Mom, I'm running late."
That's right.
It's just common courtesy, and we need to extend that same courtesy to the other parents.
Yeah, you'd give that courtesy to a stranger.
You would, yeah.
So, I'm sure in your job, there's sometimes a fine line between being an attorney and being a therapist.
Yeah, sure.
Do you find that people come to court expecting emotional justice, sometimes beyond just that legal decision?
Well, sometimes I kind of joke that, working with an attorney is kind of expensive therapy.
That's right.
And I often encourage clients going through a divorce to seek professional counseling.
Sure.
Not only is it less expensive, they're better trained to deal with a lot of the emotional side of things. I've got 35 years of experience doing this. I've been through it myself, so I can offer some very practical advice. But truly, I'm not a counselor in that sense of the word.
Right.
There are times when a divorce trial, or like a deposition, is somewhat therapeutic.
Yeah.
I don't know what the true terminology that a psychiatrist or psychologist would use, but I've seen that it can be therapeutic, because sometimes people just want to tell their story.
Yeah.
They want to be heard. Now, quite frankly, judges generally could care less about the emotions,
sure,
or any kind of theatrics.
Kind of have to.
But they have to kind of insulate themselves from that. But sometimes the parties think that they need it, and sometimes, the attorneys kind of get caught up in it a little bit. Sometimes it's productive, and sometimes it's not productive.
Right.
But again, that's expensive type of therapy.
Yeah.
So it's always better to try to reach agreements. And even, I will say this, even in mediation sometimes, a parent can be heard.
Right.
In other words, it's not like, a trial that you see on TV where you're cross-examining the husband about his spending habits, or the wife about, the tidiness of the house, or how well kept the kids are.
Right.
But there are times, like in mediation, where each side kind of needs to hear things from the other perspective.
Yeah.
Here's why I need this flexibility for my schedule. Here's why I don't think paying you child support is fair, but here's what I want to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes just hearing the other side out is important. Now, attorneys can kind of perform that role too.
Yeah.
We can, certainly we listen to our clients as we shape their case or shape our strategy, but we also want to reach out to the other attorney and say, listen, I don't understand why this is such an important issue to your
Right.
client. Is there a backstory or something I need to hear?
Help me understand.
Yeah, help me understand. And something I do with all my divorce clients, I ask them to kind of do what we call a chronology letter.
Mm-hmm.
I think I kind of learned this actually going through marriage counseling many, many years ago. But
Yeah.
it's like, what are the significant markers or events in your story with the other parent? Okay.
Yeah.
Because that helps us see kind of things from a bird's eye view and have a better understanding of why they're here today and what we need to be looking for. So let me use this as an example. If you find out that the parents lost a child, that would maybe help you understand better their relationship with the existing children or the sadness that they're going through. If one parent just lost their parent, that's important to know. If a parent had a horrible relationship with their father or mother, that may help shape things or help give better understanding. If a family, let's say the breadwinner, lost his or her job and was unemployed for many years, or that they lost a huge investment, or they had they were entrepreneurial and lost a business interest, that would help understand sort of the financial insecurity that one of them may have in a case. So understanding those big events in a person's life, or their life with their spouse, or their life with their significant other, gives you a better understanding how to help this family.
Gosh, that would be great for married couples to do. Like you said, learning that in marriage counseling, that would be something for new couples if you're getting ready to dive into a marriage. Sit down and help understand why somebody may react to something the way they do. That's great advice.
Well, and as we mentioned at the top of this, although as a lawyer, I've done nothing really but family law for over 35 years, but I also pastor a small church.
Yeah.
I sometimes joke that I'm paying penitence for my sins as a divorce attorney by serving a church. I tell people I would never wish a divorce on anyone, quite frankly. I would never wish cancer on anyone, and we need good cancer doctors. So although I wouldn't wish a divorce on anyone, my skill set, my experiences as a divorce attorney. But as putting on my pastor hat for just a moment, when I've done marriage counseling with young couples, I often ask them to do something like this chronology letter to explain their relationship, their ups and downs of their relationship. Maybe they dated for several years and then for whatever reason they broke up and then became reunited. I think that's important to know as I'm doing some counseling with them. Also having some understanding of their biological family background. If let's say I'm counseling with some couple and the wife or the fiance grew up in a home without a father, or her parents divorced early on, that may help me understand some of the anxieties that she's facing and the fears that she's facing entering into a marriage. Conversely, if one side grew up in a home where finances were extremely tight or they were forced to move from home to home, that would help maybe explain why they value financial security very highly. So the same is true in marriages, but the same is true as couples are ending their marriage. as it relates to how best can we help this family continue to co-parent in the future.
Absolutely. What great advice. I love that. And we are going to get back to your pastoring too. I want to dive into that. I have a couple more though for you.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about high conflict parents. So going through a nasty split, of course, I've researched at length what this does to children and have been in talks with a professor of psychology about the long-term effects that high conflict parenting has on a child. But I'll keep it legal today. So what should someone understand about how the court handles high conflict parents or parents who are being deliberately difficult, deliberately manipulative just to win one over on the other parent?
Well, let me say that, first of all, divorce attorneys make a pretty good living when people are being unreasonable.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I've been involved in a lot of high conflict divorces over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's high conflict because of a substantial financial estate that they're
Right.
dividing. Sometimes it's high conflict because of children. Sometimes it's high conflict because there's a history of abuse, either physical abuse or drug or alcohol abuse. As you've sort of intimated, certainly children suffer from high conflict divorces.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any judge would ever disagree with that. Now, there are times when the parties may be engaged in high conflict sort of fighting, but can insulate the children from that. And I've been involved in a number of cases where it's been highly contested, very contentious, but the children by and large are insulated from it.
Right.
Unfortunately, most of the high conflict cases involve custody cases, and as part of that, the children are caught in the middle.
Right.
Now, that may be that they're caught in the middle because of some event that happened. Let's say there's an allegation of physical abuse or sexual abuse, which would be much worse, but then they can't help but be brought into it. Other times, they are almost like pawns, where a parent tries to manipulate them one way or the other. One of the difficulties with all of that, and I think a child psychologist could explain this better than I can, but it's a fine line between giving children some say into what's going on in their lives, giving them some input, as opposed to enabling them and thinking that they're calling all the shots.
Right.
One of my pet peeves just in society in general is that sometimes parents, they don't want to discipline kids.
Yeah.
We see kids acting out in school and other places because they think the world revolves around them.
Yeah.
Now, I think every parent should do what they can to make a child feel loved and secure and appreciated and valued. But it's a fine line between that and giving them the sense of, you're a little princess.
Yeah.
Or, you're the little prince.
You deserve
you
things.
you deserve the the latest Xbox or deserve the latest iPhone. So, and courts are mindful of that. Over the years, we've had some really good judges here in Buchanan County who have had to do child interviews, for example, where you're interviewing children generally about their preference, where they, what sort of custodial arrangement would they like to see? How much time do they want to spend with mom? How much time do they want to spend with dad? What are some favorite things they enjoy doing with dad? What are some things they enjoy doing with mom? But the judges usually are very careful to say to a child, I want to hear your voice.
Yeah.
I want you to have a voice in this, but you need to understand at the end of the day, I have to do what's in your best interest.
Yeah.
And that may or may not be what you want.
Right.
And so that is, it's letting them know that we're going to hear them. We're going to take into consideration what they want, but, we're just not going to let a 6-year-old or even a 12-year-old or 15-year-old make that decision because
Call the shots.
yeah, and can you imagine if a judge let that happen, if the judge let a 9-year-old make that decision, how that would empower the child, and the next time the child gets in trouble at school, the child feels as though, I don't have to listen to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a fine line, and I think again the parents who are really focused on what do we need to do, both mom and dad, to raise well-adjusted, happy, emotionally healthy children. Their focus has to be on trying to raise them to be kind and loving and respectful and disciplined,
right?
In some way. And I'm not advocating like corporal punishment, but what I am saying is, if a child in one home has certain expectations and rules, and then in the other home they're just allowed to call all the shots.
Yeah,
that's unfortunate, and that kind of leads me to something else kind of related. So, divorces or breakup of families, that's always emotional, and it's emotionally difficult for everybody. But I'm often reminding parents that you have to be the emotional adult,
right,
rather than the child taking on that role. Okay, so let me see if I can use an illustration. I'll kind of make up as I go along here, but let's say that the mom is really devastated that husband's filed for divorce. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's natural for her to be sad. Sure. It's natural for her to be even angry. Mm-hmm. But if the 12-year-old son sees her crying all the time, depressed all the time, lashing out at father all the time, what I see too often, and again, I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, but what I see is that child taking on the emotional adult role of being strong, where the parent has become the emotionally immature child.
Right.
So what I would tell any parent going through a divorce, particularly if it's contested and particularly if children are involved and these issues are not resolved, to turn to counseling.
Yes.
Figure out as best you can how to cope with this very unfortunate event happening in a way that minimizes the impact on the children.
Right.
Now, I'm not suggesting everyone needs to be like a robot and never show emotions and those sort of things. And I also think it's okay for parents to be honest with their children about their fear, their sadness, but not to dwell on it.
Right.
Okay. If I would not fault any parent who the children has seen cry over the sadness of the breakup of their marriage.
Right.
Okay. But if that is an event that happens daily or even weekly, and the parent then uses that as a way to blame the other spouse. I can't believe your dad is doing this to us. I can't believe your dad is leaving us for this woman. Or I can't believe your mom is abandoning the family and experiencing midlife crisis or whatever. That is emotionally damaging on a child.
Very.
So what I again, is encourage parents always to be the adult. To be the emotional adult as well, and not rely upon the children.
For sure. What you do is you put those adult feelings on the children unnecessarily, and at such a young age where they're forced to grow up so much quicker than is needed. Mm-hmm. So with high conflict families, I've experienced this with with friends, how I see them become pretty rigid in their schedules, pretty rigid in, well, nope, the kids are not going with you because this is my day. This is, swapping weekends, adjusting times. How can parents be flexible, even in that high conflict situation, put their children first, without setting a pattern that makes them feel used or powerless later on? Do you suggest veering from that court-ordered plan? I know you touched on that a bit. That's part of the logical versus the legal. That's something that we do. We say the parenting plan is a suggestion, but we do what works best for our family.
Sure.
But in those high conflict situations where you see a parent using that schedule against the other, what advice do you have there?
Well, again, it kind of goes back to what's good for the goose is, good for the gander. So, unfortunately, what sometimes happens is one parent is always being flexible and the other parent is always being inflexible. So there are times when I've had to tell my client, maybe, let's say she calls and she says, I have let Dad exchange weekends now. This is the 5th time in the last 3 months. And that plays havoc with my schedule. There are times when I have to encourage them to be a little more firm.
Yeah.
Or at least say to the other parent, okay, I'm going to make this change for you, or I'm going to let you do this one time, but in the future I need more advance notice of this. Sometimes that works. I'll tell you that there's some other things that parents can use that helps manage some of this. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there's different types of software that's done for family law matters in particular, and the most widely used one is called Our Family Wizard, and it is it's a calendaring program, but it's also a program where you can overlay or include medical bills, insurance payments, co-pays, extraordinary expenses, and those sort of things. And what that does, it becomes a central repository for the communication between the parents. It generally would also replace text messages between the parents and emails between the parents, and sometimes even phone calls between the parents. The other nice thing about it avoids the kind of he said, she said.
Yeah.
Because everything is date stamped. So let's say, for example, if a father complains, hey, I was not notified of this doctor's appointment until 30 minutes before the doctor's appointment. And then wife could demonstrate, no, I told you 3 months ago when we scheduled it, and here is the date and time stamp. 2 weeks ago, I reminded you of that appointment, and here it is again. My communication today was just seeing if you were going to come, because I'd already provided that to you. Yeah. So applications like that, and some of them are more expensive than others. Some of them may even be free. But they can avoid a lot of this conflict that we see in domestic cases. Ironically, Our Family Wizard even has kind of a tone meter that can point out to a party about ready to send a message, hey, that's not the appropriate tone to use. And I've had at least one judge order that the parties use the tone meter function because he sees the tone of the messages back and forth between the two parents. Yeah. So some things like that can help. Again, it's always best if parents can be flexible with one another, but that really has to go both ways. Yeah. And if one parent is taking advantage of that without really good cause or good reason, that's unfortunate. And some jobs are such that parents may need that flexibility. They may have to work late on a Friday afternoon or something, or They live an hour away, and sometimes traffic gets in the way.
Sure.
But this goes back to the civility that we talked about earlier. If you're going to be late, let the other side know.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure, in handling those high conflict situations, or even not, you do want to cross your T's and dot your I's. And let's say somebody doesn't have access or isn't using the Our Family Wizard app or something along those lines. Tell us what kind of documentation actually helps in a court situation: text, emails, call logs. What are the do's and the don'ts when gathering that kind of evidence?
Well, I always encourage clients to document everything.
Mm-hmm.
They can sometimes keep a journal. Sometimes it's an electronic journal they keep on their phone or keep on a computer. Try to put things into writing, like text messages or emails. From a very practical standpoint, text messages, courts hate text messages as evidence, especially if they're screenshots.
Really?
Okay,
Yeah.
because so often someone will, they'll type a text message to the other side, and then there's some bitter language going back and forth, and then someone takes a screenshot. So that is not nearly as helpful as downloading all of the text messages between parents. And that's what we always have clients do. We have them download all the communications,
Right.
because then you see everything in chronological order. You can see the conversation that preceded it.
Right. Full picture.
You can see the full picture. If one parent had just said something incredibly offensive to the other parent, and then 10 minutes later sent this really sweet sounding message and got this vitriolic explosion after that, you might not see that unless you could see the entire context. So
screenshot's going to be a one-way look at that, right?
It is. It's just it's just a snapshot, and it doesn't give the whole picture. So that's one piece of practical advice. Again, just documenting, journaling. If a parent is consistently late on exchanges, I tell clients, kind of record the time that he or she showed up to pick up the children, or when they brought them back. Sometimes you would want to document the condition that the kids are brought back in. If they're coming back always in extremely soiled clothing, and they weren't necessarily just coming from a play adventure, but instead just coming back at the end of the weekend, and it appears as though they hadn't bathed or cleaned or worn clean clothing, you may want to take some pictures of that.
Sure.
Here's what I'm constantly reminding clients. You have to evaluate every decision you make in the context of how is this going to appear to the judge?
Yeah.
Is this going to appear to be spiteful? Is it going to appear to be reasonable? Is it going to appear to be something that you have manipulated? So again, it's like the old saying, everything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. So just be mindful of that.
Yeah.
Be mindful of your exchanges on the phone. Be mindful of your exchanges via text. Be mindful of your behavior out in public. I mean, if you're both showing up to a soccer game and one parent is just being unreasonable and just making everyone, including the child, feel uncomfortable, that's going to come back to haunt them.
Sure.
I also, and again, this kind of dates me a little bit. I grew up, where Lone Ranger was my hero, but I always tell clients, we want to be the ones wearing the white hat.
Yeah.
So just be mindful of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've talked the legal, we've talked the logical. Now I want to talk a little bit about grace, the kind that we receive and we give. And so tell me a little bit about how your pastoral duties came about. Has this always been a passion of yours?
The short answer is yes. I've never felt called to do pastoral work full time.
Mm-hmm.
As a young teenager, I was active in youth groups and led some youth groups and would occasionally fill the pulpit.
Yeah.
I continued to do that throughout law school. In law school, I first became a youth pastor,
Very cool.
working with a church about 2 hours from Columbia. Then, as a young attorney, I was a youth minister for White Park Christian Church here in town, a large Christian church, and continued to sort of serve some local small churches, filling the pulpit when the pastor needed to be gone.
Yeah.
During COVID, my wife and I were attending a large church prior to COVID in Columbia. Over 1,000 people attended. And when they shut down, I started attending my parents' church that I had attended as a small child with my grandparents.
Yeah.
And that was a church, again, I'd filled the pulpit for the pastor when he was gone. And he then retired after 27 years or so as their minister, and they began a search for someone else. And they were going to have some intentional interim pastors. They were about ready to hire one, and then a member of the committee said, "Unless this is something you would do for us."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, let me think about it and let me pray about it." So I came back and I said, I think this is something that I would be willing to try.
Yeah.
So let's do this. I don't know if I said 3 months or 6 months, but I said, let's do it short term and see if this is a good fit. If it's a good fit for me, if it's a good fit for the church. And so we did that and found that I enjoy it. I think I can provide something, to the church as well. So I've done that now for about 3 years. The irony is, again, it's a small town, Sturgeon, Missouri, about 1,100 population or so. And within the first month, I ended up doing like 3 or 4 funerals.
Oh, wow.
So I got kind of thrown into it that way. And I've done a couple weddings and things like that. But I kind of joke about this because people here in town, in St. Joe in northwest Missouri, they know me as this very tough, aggressive divorce attorney. But in front of my church, I'm transparent, I'm vulnerable, I'm often emotional, I'm crying, they're crying.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll just stop and laugh and I'll say, man, if my opponent last week could see me now, they would never believe this. So again, I like that balance. I would like to think that my pastoral work in a church now has made me more empathetic to clients, and maybe more empathetic and graceful to my opposing counsel. And sometimes I have to stop and think, oh, that wasn't very godlike.
Sure.
So
we're human, right?
I know.
We're still human.
I get caught up in the competitiveness of a trial and stuff like that.
Sure.
But again, I think it's just a reminder that, as I'm often sharing with the congregation, we need to extend grace to one another. And then I bring that back to the context of a family unit and know, as I said before, being a single parent is tough. Being a parent where both parents are in the same household is tough.
Yeah.
It gets, sometimes events change. Raising a 3-year-old is different than an 8-year-old and different than a 15 or 17-year-old. And then being a step parent brings its own challenges. So what's important is that we need to love and encourage and support the children, but certainly be respectful and compassionate and graceful to the other parent as much as we can.
Absolutely. Have you ever found yourself, either praying with a client or offering that pastoral care in a legal case? Yeah,
it's ironic, and I mentioned this to my Sunday school class that I teach. I mentioned this just yesterday. I said I share with almost all of my clients that I pastor a church. Some clients, I think, maybe have sought me out because they know that. Yeah. Others have no idea that I do that, and they just know I'm this big, bad, aggressive attorney. But I do share my faith, at least superficially, with clients. I have had some clients specifically ask, hey, can we pray?
Yeah.
And I'm always willing to do that. There have been other clients who, whatever they're going through, I've sensed that would be comforting to them.
Sure.
And I've offered. Normally I don't suggest it unless they ask, but there have been a few occasions when I've done that. And, and I can tell you that ever since I've been an attorney, I mean, I often will pray for guidance and strength and wisdom, and as I approach any kind of particularly contested trial or something like that. And I think I probably learned that as a teenager before a basketball game or something like that. But again, my faith is important to me, and I'm not afraid to ever share that with a client. Thus far, I've not had anyone say, well, if you're a pastor, I don't think I want you to represent me. Most of them are somewhat relieved because, I don't know, maybe 25, 30% of, maybe more, of the people I'm helping through a divorce are Christian or they belong to some other religion where divorce is frowned upon.
Right.
So for me to share with them, hey, I'm divorced myself. I'm willing to be this professional advocate for you and counselor for you and while you're going through a divorce. But, I balance that with my faith and do this other stuff. I think that can be kind of comforting to some.
Reassuring. Absolutely. Well, what would Pastor Ritchie say? How can someone balance justice and grace when dealing with a difficult co-parent?
Well, one of the things I guess I would always encourage everyone to do is to try to see things from the other person's perspective, right? Whether we're talking about social justice or we're talking about justice in the family law court, having some idea of where the other person is coming from is important.
Yeah.
Too often, decisions are made out of fear.
Yeah.
The fear of how often am I going to get to spend time with my children? The fear of my financial future. The fear of, I was planning for retirement and now I'm not going to be able to retire because we're dividing all of our assets.
Sure.
So all that kind of stuff goes on in a divorce situation or family law matter situation. So understanding the other person's perspective, their concerns, their fears, their aspirations, I think is very, very important. And just recognizing that, hey, we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
Whether that's, sometimes attorneys make mistakes.
Yeah.
But
we're born sinners.
Yeah. And so just being willing to extend that kind of grace, I think is important. I may have mentioned this to you before, but I've thought about writing a book someday about this. But the idea of extending grace to the other parent that you're or your divorced, your former spouse. Sometimes even after a divorce is over, one side asking the other side to forgive them for whatever was going on. Sometimes it's just, hey, forgive me that I wasn't mature enough to make this work.
Right.
I think can go a long way to helping mend some relationships. And sometimes it's that breakthrough that people need. Not, and I'm not talking about trying to eventually reconcile necessarily, but what I'm talking about is even in the midst of a highly contested divorce, there are times when a person, if they're sincere about this, and they will just apologize to the other side.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm sorry I let you down. I'm sorry that I ventured outside of our marriage. I'm sorry that this business that I tried to launch wasn't successful. I'm sorry that I wasn't there when you lost your mom or dad. I'm sorry that I was not more emotionally invested in our relationship, whatever the case may be. I think there is tremendous power in that.
Absolutely.
Sometimes, again, if that can be done, and sometimes it needs to be done in a truly counseling situation. But even if not, even if that can be done either informally between the parties or even with the attorneys there, that can be a powerful way to break through.
Yes.
And then often there can be settlements or resolutions based upon that. And sometimes a party will say, I really needed to hear that, or I didn't know that he or she felt that way.
Yeah.
I often encourage clients who are just contemplating a divorce to seek out marriage counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I will tell them that counseling may be for the purposes of reconciling.
Yeah.
But it also may just be for the purposes of learning how to co-parent with one another and to treat each other with dignity and respect after the divorce.
Right.
So some people get some value out of that.
Yeah, I love that. Such great advice. Forgiveness is such a big thing. Being able to say I'm sorry to someone can go so far. But forgiveness in itself, we've talked about this. My mother-in-law and I just had a conversation this week about, forgiving. I'm not asking you to forget what's happened, but just saying, I forgive you, I forgive me, is so freeing, and it can allow you to move forward. You may never hear that I'm sorry that you're looking for, but giving that forgiveness in place of that can also set you free.
Sure. Yeah. It works on a variety of different levels.
Sure.
Sometimes it's you can ask a person to sincerely forgive you, and you get that immediate response, okay, or I forgive you, or sometimes you would ask for forgiveness and not get the immediate feedback that you need. You're kind of planting that seed, and then perhaps they eventually will see that you're being sincere and honest about it. And then they'll come back and say, I really needed to hear that from you, and thank you.
Right.
But sometimes just offering that or asking for that forgiveness can be liberating for yourself. And
Sure.
And as you mentioned, sometimes people need to forgive themselves.
Yeah.
We serve a gracious God.
Absolutely.
And so, asking for forgiveness is important. It's liberating, but the ability to forgive yourself is important too.
Yes, absolutely. Craig, what an important informational conversation we have had today. Thank you so much for showing up with clarity, honesty, and decades of earned wisdom.
Well, it's certainly my privilege to be here, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to share these thoughts.
Of course. I appreciate you. If you're listening today and feeling overwhelmed by court orders, parenting plans, or financial rulings that don't seem to make sense, just know this. The legal system might define your rights, but it does not define your worth. There are so many people out there in your shoes. You are not alone. A court's decision doesn't define who you are. It doesn't decide the kind of parent you get to show up as, or the kind of peace you can create in your own home. Keep showing up, keep asking questions, and when the law doesn't feel logical, lead with love anyway. As always, you are doing better than you think. I'm Jody Grace, and you're listening to Co-Parenting with Grace. I'll see you next time.